It is time to check in with Chris Dimakos. He's our CJAD 800 legal contributor. And Chris, I think it's fair to say there's a whole lot more bad news than there is good news in the cards this week. So let me start with one here. The Bay, right, oldest retailer in this country, we now know, filing for bankruptcy protection. They will be liquidating. That's potentially 9,000 jobs across the country through 80 stores that conceivably could be lost if there is no white knight. Plus, you're letting me know as well, major corporations in this country are giving pretty grim outlooks for 2025 to shareholders, and that's obviously a pretty bad sign as well. So, that said, there may be a lot of people out there now wondering how long they're going to have their jobs, what to do if they're told, you know what, sorry, we're going to have to start laying people off. We know the federal government, by the way, about a week or so ago, I think we had Steve McKinnon, the employment minister, on, talking about the fact that there are backstops being set up because they're anticipating this is going to happen. So let's start with that. You find yourself in that situation. You're going to now be out of work or have your hours reduced. What do you do? What can you do?
Right. And, you brought up a great point how the employment minister was looking for programs to try and backstop. There's something called they just came out with a new program called the employee share program, where if you have 5 people, let's say, in one department, and the company, instead of letting 1 or 2 employees go, says, why don't we put everyone on a 3-day work week and apply for this program, and then the 2 days that they're not working would be subsidized by the federal government. So there's a lot of programs looking at this. But if you're an employee right now, I think it's fair to say that many companies are evaluating what the next 12 to 24 months is going to look like with this new administration in place and the threat of tariffs. It's not just if you are in the industry, but there's always a ripple effect. So it could be, if you don't deal with the U.S., but you sell to a customer that deals with the U.S., well, if they're buying less, it indirectly impacts you. So this is what most people are worried about, and companies are trying to forecast how much overhead they have, how many employees they have, and they don't want to let this thing get out of control. So it's possible that there's going to be shuffling at work. Might be a work reduction. People might talk to you about taking a pay cut. People might talk to you about changing your responsibilities, adding more responsibilities to your work because they let go of somebody else. And ultimately, sometimes they talk about letting you go and letting you go, not just, hey, here's a nice hefty package. Sometimes that package doesn't look so good when times are tough like this. So it's important if you're out there to always know that it's a possibility and to know how to react when that happens.
All right, well, let's talk about a reaction because, that's what, lawyers and legal advice is for. Let's say you find yourself to something you just outlined, Chris. Your company comes back and says, look, times are tough. It's going to be a bad year. We're going to ask you to take a pay cut. Yet you've been making, and you have a contract or whatever, and this is what you make. What do you do in a case like that? Is the idea that if you don't accept it, you lose your job?
Right. That's a great point. So usually what happens is it's not a law, right? But there's case law and there's precedent and there's situations. And it looks like, there's this unwritten rule that 10% seems to be a recognized threshold where if a company asks you to take a pay cut that is less than 10%, it's not considered to be a constructive dismissal where they're trying to let you go by forcing you out the door by not accepting this. So 10%, just understand that. But what you should look at whenever these things happen, whether it's a job responsibility, whether it's a pay cut, whatever the case may be, you have to look at this as the company as a whole. Who is being asked to have their pay cut? Is it just you, or is it everyone across the whole company? Because if it's the latter, well, then you have a much less chance of being able to prove that it's a constructive dismissal. But if you're the only one that they're asking to have a pay cut, well, then the chances are much stronger that they're targeting you to try and push you out the door. So the first thing you do is the minute that someone approaches you and says, here's what we want to change, whether it be responsibility, salary, work week, whatever. The first thing you want to do is get information. Who is this applied to? Is it just me? And you're allowed to ask those questions to your HR or to your manager. Is it just me or is it everyone else? Who's being affected by these? These are things that you're entitled to know and to know, what your course of action is going to be next. And if you've established or you feel like this is something that is particular to you and not so much a company-wide decision, well, the next step is to take a look and get some advice on, hey, what are my rights here? Can I oppose this? And if I get fired for opposing it, can I claim a package or a penalty from the tribunals? You have to start understanding what the consequences are for your decisions afterwards. But the first order of business is find out if this thing is objective, meaning it goes company-wide, not particular to you, or is this something that's very, very precise and only applies to you?
Okay, and what if it is just a change in job responsibility, for example, one that you weren't doing but that they need you now to do?
Right. The first thing you want to look at is what are your credentials? If you are someone who's in sales, but they're asking you to do accounting or warehouse work. If something is outside the realm of what your assets are and what your what your credentials are, well, that would be maybe a too far stretch where you can be justified in saying that's not on my wheelhouse. That's not what I was hired to do. But for example, if they ask you to take on some of the administrative work that correlates to what you've been doing, companies have been deemed to be justified in doing so when times are tough economically. So the first thing you want to do is, what are they asking me to do? How much more work is this? Am I able to complete these tasks? Because the last thing you want to do is accept things that you're not able to complete, which would then affect your performance, which would put you in a bad position with the company. So evaluate what the work is, if you're capable of doing it, if it's within your capabilities and your experience, and if it is, and you can shoulder, then that's something that the company can do. It's only when it's outside of those attributes that I talked about, when it goes too far, when it's too far of a stretch, when it's too much work for you to be able to complete, that's when you're justified in saying, I can't do that. And you wouldn't get penalized. You would be vindicated if ever this thing went to a tribunal. So understand what that limit is, and if you need help, you can seek a professional, but the company doesn't have carte blanche when it comes to that. There are limits as to how much they can put on your plate and what they put on your plate as well.
And that's where we leave it. Chris Dimakos. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric.